World of long-haul trucking hides many secrets. It's a vast, sprawling network of roads and highways, connecting cities and towns across the country. Truckers spend countless hours on the road, often in isolation, navigating through the night and battling fatigue. But within this seemingly mundane world there are dark corners and hidden dangers that most people never see. But among these secrets lies a tale of horror that chills the bones. It's a story that has haunted the trucking community for decades, a story of unimaginable cruelty and terror. This is not just a tale of crime, it's a nightmare that became all too real for those who crossed paths with a certain predator. This is the story of Robert Ben Rhoades, known as the truck stop killer. Rhoades was no ordinary trucker, he was a sadistic predator who used his job as a cover for his heinous activities. His name has become synonymous with fear and dread, a reminder of the evil that can lurk behind a friendly facade. He was a predator who used America's vast network of highways as his hunting ground. These highways, stretching for miles and miles, provided the perfect cover for his sinister deeds. He could move from state to state, leaving little trace of his presence and always staying one step ahead of the law. His crimes spanned from the late 1980s to the early 1990s, leaving a trail of terror behind him. Each crime was more brutal than the last, and the authorities struggled to piece together the clues. The fear he instilled in the trucking community and beyond was palpable, as people wondered who would be next. Rhoades' truck was more than a vehicle, it was a mobile torture chamber. Inside he had created a nightmarish environment where he could carry out his twisted fantasies. The interior of his truck was modified to suit his dark purposes, turning it into a place of unimaginable suffering for his victims. He preyed on the vulnerable, using his charm and trucker persona to lure victims. Hitchhikers, runaways, and those down on their luck were his primary targets. He would offer them a ride, a friendly smile, and a sense of safety, only to reveal his true, monstrous nature once they were trapped inside his truck. The truck stop. Killer's reign of terror came to an end in 1994. After years of evading capture, the law finally caught up with him. His arrest was a moment of relief for many, but it also brought to light the full extent of his atrocities. The details of his crimes shocked the nation and left a lasting impact on all who heard them. His arrest and conviction brought a small measure of justice, but the scars he left remain. The families of his victims continue to grapple with their loss, and the trucking community remains haunted by the memory of the truck stop killer. While he may be behind bars, the fear and pain he caused will never be forgotten. Robert Ben Rhoades was born on November 22, 1945 in Council Bluffs, Iowa. Growing up in a small town, Rhoades experienced a relatively quiet childhood. However, beneath the surface of this seemingly normal upbringing, dark tendencies began to brew. By the 1980s, he had found his calling as a long-haul trucker. The trucking industry was booming, and Rhoades embraced the lifestyle wholeheartedly. The long stretches of highway and the solitude of the open road suited him perfectly. The open road offered him freedom and a cover for his heinous activities. It was a perfect camouflage for someone with sinister intentions. The vast, unending highways provided him with countless opportunities to carry out his dark desires without drawing attention. Working as a trucker gave Rhoades access to a constant stream of potential victims. Truck stops and rest areas became his hunting grounds. These places were frequented by travelers and hitchhikers, people who were often alone and vulnerable. The transient nature of the job meant he could move from place to place without raising suspicion. Each new destination was a fresh start, a new opportunity to find unsuspecting prey. His ability to blend in with the trucking community made him nearly invisible. He frequented truck stops, rest areas, and highways, blending in with other drivers. To the outside world, he was just another trucker, sharing stories and meals with his peers. But behind this facade, a much darker reality was unfolding. But unlike his fellow truckers, Rhoades carried a deadly secret. His seemingly ordinary truck was a mobile prison, a place where he could carry out his horrific acts without fear of discovery. His truck was customized to serve a sinister purpose. The interior was meticulously altered to create a space where he could imprison and torture his victims. Every detail was carefully planned to ensure that his dark deeds remained hidden. The back was converted into a torture chamber, equipped with chains, shackles, and other tools of torment. This gruesome setup allowed him to inflict unimaginable pain on his victims, all while maintaining the appearance of a regular trucker. Rhoades' actions were calculated and methodical. He took great care in planning each abduction, ensuring that no detail was overlooked. His meticulous nature made him a formidable predator, one who was always several steps ahead of his pursuers. He knew how to lure his victims, how to trap them, and how to inflict maximum pain. His charm and seemingly friendly demeanor made it easy for him to gain the trust of his victims, only to betray them in the most horrific ways imaginable. The story of Robert Ben Rhoades is a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind the most ordinary of facades. Rhoades' truck was his fortress. To the outside world it seemed like any other long-haul vehicle, but inside, it was a chamber of horrors. The back of the truck was soundproofed, ensuring that no cries for help would be heard. Chains hung from the walls and a bed was bolted to the floor. Victims were bound, gagged, and subjected to unimaginable torture. Rhoades took pleasure in their pain, documenting his atrocities with photographs. These images would later serve as evidence of his sadistic nature. The truck was a mobile dungeon, moving from state to state, leaving a trail of blood and despair. Rhoades' control over his victims was absolute. In this confined space he was the master, and they were his captives. Rhoades did not choose his victims randomly. He had a specific type: vulnerable, isolated, and unlikely to be missed. Hitchhikers, runaways, and women traveling alone were his primary targets. These individuals were already on the fringes of society, making them easy prey. Rhoades was a predator with a keen sense for weakness. He frequented truck stops and rest areas, places where people were often desperate for a ride or a bit of kindness. His appearance was deceiving. He looked like any other trucker, a man who could be trusted. Once he had gained their trust, the trap was set. Rhoades' method of selection was cold and calculating. Section 5: Methods of Manipulation. Rhoades was a master manipulator. His ability to gain the trust of his victims was a key part of his modus operandi. He used charm and deceit to lure them into his truck, promising safety and assistance. But once they were inside, his true nature emerged. The transition from savior to tormentor was swift and brutal. He used psychological tactics to break his victims. Isolation, fear, and unpredictability were his tools. By keeping them in a constant state of terror, he maintained control. Physical torture was accompanied by mental anguish. This unpredictability was designed to keep them off balance, unable to anticipate what would happen next. Section 6: The Horrific Crimes. The crimes of Robert Ben Rhoades were marked by extreme brutality. His victims suffered prolonged torture, both physical and psychological. He took sadistic pleasure in their pain, documenting his atrocities with photographs. One of his most notorious crimes involved Regina K. Walters, a 14-year-old girl. She was hitchhiking with her boyfriend when Rhoades abducted them. Her boyfriend was killed quickly, but Regina's ordeal lasted much longer. Rhoades kept her captive, subjecting her to unimaginable horrors. He cut her hair, dressed her in different clothes, and took disturbing photographs before ultimately killing her. Rhoades' crimes were not confined to one area. He traveled across states, leaving a trail of victims in his wake. Section 7: Patterns and Investigation. Detectives began noticing a pattern in the late 1980s. Bodies were found near highways, often showing signs of torture. The connection to truck stops and rest areas suggested a mobile predator. But identifying the killer was no easy task. The transient nature of truck driving allowed Rhoades to remain elusive, always one step ahead of the law. Authorities from different states started to collaborate, sharing information and evidence. The realization that they were dealing with a serial killer spurred a more focused investigation. Yet, Rhoades' ability to cover his tracks made it difficult to gather concrete evidence. His victims were often from different jurisdictions, complicating the investigative process. The arrest of Robert Ben Rhoades came on a fateful day in April 1990. A patrol officer in Arizona stopped his truck for a routine inspection. What the officer found inside was beyond comprehension. A woman was handcuffed and chained in the cab, her face etched with terror. This discovery marked the beginning of the end for the truck stop killer. The woman, who had been abducted and tortured, provided crucial information about Rhoades. She described the horrors she endured and the modifications inside the truck. Her testimony was a key piece of evidence, painting a vivid picture of Rhoades' sadistic methods. Rhoades was taken into custody, but the investigation was far from over. The escape of a woman known only as Deborah was a turning point in the hunt for Rhoades. She had been abducted and subjected to unspeakable torture, but her will to survive was stronger than Rhoades' control. One night, she managed to break free from her restraints and fled the truck, running into the night. Her escape was miraculous, but her ordeal was far from over. Deborah found help from a passing motorist, who alerted the authorities. Her testimony was crucial, providing a detailed account of Rhoades' methods and the layout of his truck. She described the torture chamber in horrifying detail, giving investigators the evidence they needed to connect the dots. Deborah's bravery in coming forward was instrumental in building the case against Rhoades. The trial of Robert Ben Rhoades began in 1994. It was a moment of reckoning for the truck stop killer. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and the testimonies of his surviving victims were powerful. Each piece of evidence, each photograph, each witness account painted a damning picture of his sadistic nature. The prosecution presented a meticulous case, detailing Rhoades' methods and the extent of his crimes. The photographs found in his truck were particularly chilling, showing the torture and suffering of his victims. Rhoades showed little remorse during the trial. In the end, Rhoades was found guilty on multiple counts of murder, kidnapping, and torture. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Robert Ben Rhoades' crimes have left an indelible mark on criminal history. Known as the truck stop killer, his heinous acts spanned across multiple states, leaving a trail of devastation and fear. His modus operandi involved preying on vulnerable individuals at truck stops, using his seemingly ordinary job as a long-haul truck driver to mask his sinister intentions. The truck stop killer's reign of terror is a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind a seemingly ordinary facade. Truck stops, often seen as safe havens for weary travelers, became hunting grounds for Rhoades. His ability to blend into the background, to appear as just another trucker, made him an elusive and dangerous predator. His ability to evade capture for so long highlights the challenges faced by law enforcement in tracking mobile predators. The vast network of highways and truck stops provided him with countless opportunities to strike and disappear without a trace. Investigators had to piece together clues from different jurisdictions, often working with limited resources and information. The impact on his victims and their families is immeasurable. Each life he took left a void that could never be filled. Families were torn apart, their loved ones ripped from their lives in the most brutal manner. The grief and anguish experienced by these families are beyond words. The physical and psychological scars linger, a constant reminder of the horror they endured. Survivors of Rhoades' attacks carry with them the trauma of their experiences, often struggling with nightmares, anxiety, and a pervasive sense of fear. The road to recovery is long and arduous, and for many, the scars never fully heal. For those who survived, the trauma is a lifelong burden. They live with the memories of their encounters with Rhoades, haunted by the knowledge that they were lucky to escape with their lives. Their stories serve as a testament to their resilience and strength, but also as a stark reminder of the evil they faced. For the families of those who did not, the pain of loss is compounded by the brutality of Rhoades' actions. The knowledge that their loved ones suffered at the hands of such a monster adds an unbearable weight to their grief. Memorials and vigils offer some solace, but the wounds remain deep and raw. Despite the darkness, the bravery of survivors and the dedication of law enforcement brought Rhoades to justice. The tireless efforts of investigators, the courage of those who testified, and the support of the community all played a crucial role in ending his reign of terror. The courtroom became a battleground where justice was finally served. His reign of terror ended, providing a measure of peace to those he harmed. While the scars remain, the knowledge that Rhoades can no longer hurt anyone else offers some comfort. The serene memorials adorned with flowers and candles stand as a tribute to the lives lost and a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit in the face of